Good afternoon to everyone watching us live on Zoom and Facebook, and welcome to the third edition of SCMAP Live for 2022, presented in partnership with Eastern Communications. I'm Ana Rose Ochoa, SCMAP Program Director, and your host for the next hour. As we continue to emerge from the challenges posed by 2 years of COVID-19 lockdowns, and as we face emerging economic and geopolitical disruptions, the importance of keeping our supply chain moving has never been more important. Our customers and partners' needs are evolving, and we have to anticipate and cater to them. How we respond to is important, and it determines how competitive our companies are, how satisfied our customers can be, and how much value we can provide to our shareholders, employers, and partners as well. In the early stages of the pandemic, most businesses had to rely on quick fix to stay afloat. 2.5 years later, our solutions must be permanent, sustainable, and innovative. We have talked about digitalizing our operations and processes, about embracing new technologies, about adapting to new methods such as contactless payments and cloud technologies. 2.5 years on, we have to future-proof our supply chains, and it has never been easier to do so. In this edition of SCMAP Live, we will look at how efforts to develop robust, resilient, and future-proof supply chains has been within closer reach to businesses, as well as strategies to help us better take advantage of these opportunities. Joining me today are two panelists with extensive experience in how businesses are adapting to the new normal. First off is Edsel Paglinawan, Product and Innovation Head of Eastern Communications. He has over 20 years of experience in telecommunications and IT. In his current role, he works closely with clients to formulate connectivity solutions for enterprises of every size. Edsel, welcome to SCMAP Live.
Good afternoon, everybody. And again, thank you very much for having us here. Excited to share some insights with you guys. And yeah.
Also joining us today is Gino Belgira, National Partnership Manager for the Kacific Broadband Satellites Group. He oversees overall strategic partnerships for the global telecom firm, which aims to provide affordable broadband access to all. Gino, welcome to SCMAP Live.
Thank you, Ms. Ochi. I'm happy to be here. Happy to share some insights as well.
Okay. Before we continue, you can also post your questions on our chat box in Zoom, and we will attend to them later. Okay, so let us begin with Edsel. We have seen a lot of changes in the way businesses operate and respond to its customers in the last 2 years. With the pace of change, accelerating adoption of innovative solutions being fast-tracked, what have you observed has happened, and where do you think are we headed next?
Thank you very much, Ms. Ochi. Well, actually, the worldwide supply chain, nakita natin yung challenges in the past 2 years. And I should say Eastern is also not exempt from the challenges, and our customers base are also not exempt from what has happened and what has been happening until today. We experienced some shortages in the chips, some shortages in supply and the inventory of the routers, of the servers, etc. And we indeed have to do something, or had to do something about that. Not only for our internal requirements, but also the way we deliver services to our customers. Business has to continue. Business has not to stop. And what kind of workarounds are something that we're proud to share with you. Anong ginawa namin? How did we continue to evolve and ready to transform and continue to deliver of the services, not only to the big enterprises, but even change in the strategy, how we deliver the services as well to the SMEs and to some residential subscribers. So now many chief executives are, or I should say, chief supply chain initiatives have rapidly become the star of the season, I should say. We've seen that it's not all about cost management, survival or resiliency, despite the unavailability of some raw materials, availability of the key components in the delivery of our digital infrastructure. And we've seen that this supply chain turmoil as really the greatest threat to the company's growth, and not only to the private companies, but even to the growth of the countries as well. And as such, we as an organization in Eastern Communications, and I believe everybody in this session, we had to reimagine and manage our supply chain differently to ensure that our businesses continue, and I should say there's a growth in the future. I have discussed in my webinars in the past, in our e-huddles conducted internally by Eastern, or when we were invited by some industry associations. And I should say that before 2 years ago, the main topic was the digitalization that has happened overnight, right? People who were so scared about the digitalization had no choice but to really digitize and really embrace what the market is demanding. And I should say, I call that as the interim normal. And I believe that we passed that interim normal already. Interim normal, I define it as, yung naglalagay tayo ng mga workarounds in order for us to continue the delivery of our services to our customers. And I guess we passed that, and we've already realized which of those workarounds, which of those initiatives will continue to bring value in the future. And hence, we're moving towards the better normal, I should say. And we've learned a lot of things. Okay? The realization of the digital divide before, nakita natin, like for example, not only in supply chain, in education, for example, in one of my talks before, I mentioned about how comfortable probably our kids are, our family are doing the work from home or learning from home. But we've seen the great digital divide across the country and across the region, especially for the developing nations, that some students were struggling to use their cell phone if they do have the smartphones now joining the online classes. We've seen how some students were using the Manila Connect. You remember the Manila Connect, the one in España, as part of our partnership, Eastern Communications partnership with the city of Manila. How some students went in there along the avenue of España in order for them to get the free Wi-Fi, right? And we've seen also, or we've heard probably the president back then talking about using the AM transmitters, AM radio in the delivery of the education as well. So in our hometown, for example, I also showed that before, the teachers started to be broadcasters, learned how to be broadcasters, and they delivered classes through AM radio, imagine, okay? And hence, we talk about the pivoting as well. How are we going to do the pivot, whether that's a digital pivot or any other pivot, as long as we try to reinvent ourselves, that we continue to be of value to the market that we are serving. And as part of that digital pivot, we mentioned about the strengthening of our IT infrastructure, our business framework. We mentioned about the resiliency, and I guess that resiliency, that the learnings of that resiliency is something that we are proud of, not only as a company, but as a nation as well, that we've all learned together. So what's important is we continue that momentum, we sustain that momentum that we have learned. And the same is true for all the telcos on IT and in the telco. We started embracing the cloud. People before are also, I should say, adverse about the cloudification of their IT infrastructure, and especially now that the supply chain challenges that has been proliferating across the world. Kulang yung servers natin, hindi mo parating yung servers, kulang yung routers, and there are a lot of software as a service, or applications that need to be deployed because the market needs it. However, because of the unavailability of the IT, equipment and the servers and all this stuff, people have started, pwede naman palang gumamit ng cloud, okay? And we've seen that, and we've embraced that. And I'm really happy that despite what happened in the past 2 years, these learnings are something that, will make us continue to be resilient in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Truly, technology has been embraced by a lot of people, especially during this pandemic. No? They have to keep up with the times. Now, let's go on to you, Gino. Connectivity has been important, not just in our work, but in our day-to-day lives, but it has also become very important in the past 2 years as we turned online to work, and as Edsel mentioned, to study, shop, to buy necessities and wants. How has the demand for greater connectivity accelerated in your view over the past couple of years?
Yeah, thank you for that. You're absolutely correct, and I think Edsel covered a lot of a lot of specifics in terms of how important connectivity has been for us. And interconnectivity has really become paramount, I would say, in the past 2 years. We have seen unprecedented and fundamental changes in our daily lives. As mentioned, there's this shift to e-learning, proliferation of telemedicine. We now have a lot of online marketplaces, virtual events, and a lot of remote work and operations taking place. Now, on the one hand, I would say that this has expedited digital adoption of new applications and services like Zoom, online courier services, and as mentioned by Edsel, cloud solutions as well, but has accentuated the digital divide and further marginalizes the underconnected and underserved communities in the country who lack basic internet access. If I may pull some data from a study conducted by DACT back in 2019 across different barangays in the country, what we have seen is that 88% of the population does not have access to free Wi-Fi. Over 50% do not have access to telecommunication towers, and over 70% lack access to fiber optic cables. And what that means is that we have over 50 million Filipinos who do not have access to meaningful connectivity and fail to participate in this transition to digitization. And what we have seen, however, is that on the policy side, in the spirit of accelerating digital adoption, government and policymakers have recognized that there is a need to provide universal access to fast and reliable internet services. Hence, there was the signing of the Executive Order 127 under former President Duterte, which grants local internet service providers and value-added service providers direct access to satellite technology, whether this is domestic or international, in order for us to be able to promote inclusive internet access and growth in the Philippines. And so as such, I come from Kacific. We are able to now work with key local providers such as Eastern Communications to be able to connect these underserved and underconnected communities and businesses in the country.
Okay, thank you. Before the pandemic, it seemed that bringing your businesses digital is something only large companies with massive resources at their disposal can do. Now, certainly, small businesses are realizing the potential and the necessity of going digital. The solutions are more accessible now. Edsel, how do you think this has come to be?
I believe that there should be no discrimination on the use of technology in our transformation. We've launched very aggressive campaign since early last year about the democratization of technology, the delivery of technology, and the delivery of services here in the Philippines. Tama yung sinabi mo, Ms. Ochi. Before we thought that the access to technology, access to high tech is only reserved to big companies with massive resources. But in fact, it's not pala, okay? And with the different initiatives that had happened around, okay, and we were equally inspired to do the same thing. Like, for example, cybersecurity. Everybody deserves to be cyber secure. During the past 2 years, we've seen reports from different OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. We've seen reports from Gartner that the major threats and the attacks are happening, I should say, to not really big brands. Of course, what we see in the news, what we've seen in the media are, attacks that go to the big companies. But in fact, around 70 to 80% of the attacks are targeted towards those who are really vulnerable. Not big banks, but even the rural banks, who are, of course, having the online presence. Some SMEs, okay, MSMEs, I should say, who can't afford to build their own cyber experts. And we know the problem here in the Philippines also. When I was conversing with our partners about the challenges that I am facing or that we are facing, and how Eastern can help the different MSMEs, I was talking about the attrition happening in the Philippines. For example, one should develop a very good cyber professional. We know the attrition and the migration of the Filipinos, and looking forward to really earn better abroad. And as such, building our own competencies for small and medium enterprises is always a challenge. And not only that, building their own infrastructure is also a challenge. Kapag CapEx-based, kapag kailangan bumili ng malaking engine in order for their, let's say, website to be protected, their internet resources to be protected, that's always a challenge. But these businesses deserve to go with the transformation and the technology available in the market. So sabi natin, access to these technical innovations were only reserved before. Yes, that was only reserved before to the big enterprises. And we are glad to share with you that we are also playing our part, as not just as part of our business, but being able to dent the industries, being able to dent the Philippines. What's our contribution to make these businesses prosper and having access to technology? Again, digitalization, that's for everybody. Of course, it's all about the pain points. If the delivery of the services becomes faster through digital, of course, hindi naman lahat, okay? But we have to find the pain points of the market and our pain points on how we can reinvent and rediscover our value. Samples. Before, I mentioned about many were scared of the digitalization. Many were scared about the digital wallets. But look at us today. You need not to go to Sari-Sari store to top up your mobile subscription. You can use the mobile apps to top up your subscriptions using the digital wallets, right? No need to bring lots of cash to the grocery stores, but simply using our digital wallets, we should be able to do that. And there is also a very inspiring, picture I saw in Facebook before. In one of the markets, wet markets in Malapascua, in Cebu. So it's a remote place, beautiful place, Philippines pride. Merong wet market doon, nagtitinda ng isda, and may nakapaskel. No, we don't accept cash. We adhere to social distancing. We only accept digital wallets. Okay, and that's part of the democratization of technology, and I admire, and our participation to the adoption of the Philippine market and the adoption of the Philippine population towards this. So the businesses follow the lead of the market. Or maybe I should say it's the other way around. We do the product development, we do the market development, ano yung gusto ng merkado. Or I should say, we go hand in hand together. Ito yung gusto ng merkado, and at the same time, these are our capabilities as we develop new products and as we develop the market to where we think the market wants us to be as well. Okay. Again, one inspiring example also is about the Grab. The concept of democratization, Grab, diba? Airbnb, Grab, Shopify. These were my three examples last time when we were aggressively campaigning for the democratization here in the Philippines as Eastern's participation in the growth of our economy. So for users, like for example, for Airbnb, I mentioned about because of the democratization through Airbnb, we all have access to staycations. It's like the question of Miss Ochi earlier, that access to technology used to be part of yung big enterprises only, but even for Airbnb, the access to staycation used to be reserved only for those who can afford, for those who are in the middle class, or I should say higher income brackets. But now everybody has access using that. Of course, Airbnb was also affected during the pandemic. I myself, I'm Airbnb hosted. I was affected. So I had to shift my model to medium-term stays, for example. And the democratization in the Airbnb also helped the hosts like us to be like hotels. So we need that to be hoteliers. I don't need to be graduate of HRM in order for me to exercise my passion of accommodating my guests, locals or foreigners. And that gave me an avenue to showcase also, for example, if I have foreigner guests, I bring them, if they stay over the weekend, I bring them to Batangas, I show them underwaters, I bring them to Anidao, And even in the Grab, that's the same thing. For users, we had access to rent-a-car experience. And for the Grab drivers, they have access to be like rent-a-car operators as well. Grab food, one of the most exciting thing that happened before. Okay, we have access to high-end adobo, or we also have the same access to Nanay's adobo. Okay, and even for the sellers, online sellers that provided this Grab food, provided an avenue to be democratized, such that Nanay's Carinderia now offering barbecue can compete head-on with, I should say, barbecue of Aristocrat, exactly in the same platform, right? And somehow this kind of development really gives me goosebumps, as we're proud to have reached that level of democratization. And it's the same thing, as I mentioned earlier, about Eastern experience and how we want to take part in the democratization and the delivery of services in the Philippines. We partner with Kacific. Everybody deserves internet. Everybody deserves connectivity, but not all locations in the Philippines have access to wired internet. Not all locations in the Philippines have access to mobile data, for example. Okay, and we now have the satellite communications to be able to help us bring the digital services to the remote areas. Not just to the local communities, but even to the big businesses in the remote areas. I'm glad to share with you, for example, that Eastern and Pacific are now connecting major mining companies located in the different areas of the Philippines without access to internet before, and now they can make use of the nakakapag SAP na sila, and they're so happy. And it's almost real time. That's the feedback we got from the admin and the IT people there. So this democratization, I should say there's a parallelism with, there's also a concept, if I may share. Sorry, it's a bit academic. A concept of ephemeralization. Ephemeral. Okay, ephemeralization talks about how can technology help us to do more and more with less and less efforts. In fact, one of the definitions in there is saying that Technology has that tendency to enable human beings to do more and more with less and less until you do not have to do anything in order for us to do everything. So imagine, okay? And that parallelism with Eastern's concept and Eastern's play in the democratization is also very important. And I mentioned about the internet before. Now, cybersecurity, na-mention ko kanina as an example, we have to make the cybersecurity also prevalent. And hence, who among our customer base before are able to protect their internet resources against the DDoS attacks? Only big enterprises. That's the question exactly. Only the big enterprises, only those businesses that are lucrative enough to pay DDoS protection, which is according to the normal standard market rate, the price of the DDoS protection is twice or 3 times the internet connectivity. So imagine if your internet connectivity, dedicated internet connectivity, you are paying 100,000 pesos per month, for example. So in order for us to protect that internet, we have to spend 200 pesos more, 200,000 pesos more, or 300,000 pesos more. And only the big enterprises can afford that. Now, the effort of Eastern is to provide internet as DDoS protected by default, okay? So we're doing the testing at the moment. Excited to share with you that we'll be able to, offer by default DDoS protected internet. Kanina, I also mentioned about, as part of the premise of this, I mentioned about the high attrition for the cyber professionals because these are expensive talents, okay? And as such, we should be able to provide security as a service, okay? Security operations center as a service, and even the engine, you don't necessarily have to build engines anymore. So as such, also there is a SIEM and there is a SOAR, okay? Security incident and event management available already in the market as a service. That's just located, for example, in Eastern Cloud. And these are just part of the plays, play of Eastern in making these different technologies available, not just for big enterprises, but medium, small enterprises as well. That's very exciting. I mean, I'm really, really, really excited about these new developments on what we can offer.
Thank you for sharing the initiatives of Eastern Communications on providing internet connectivity to a greater majority of our population nationwide. Now, ongoing concern for businesses, especially here in the Philippines, is always the reliability of our IT infrastructure. We are a disaster-prone country, and our networks have yet to catch up with demand, especially in the rural parts of the country. Gino, how critical is the role of connectivity in enabling the solutions?
Yeah, internet connectivity is really the mode of transportation that connects these businesses and communities, and it enables digital solutions as well as the online transactions that take place. So actually going back to an earlier point, as mentioned by Edsel, on the importance of bridging the digital divide. So over half of the population today still either lacks reliable internet connectivity, if not completely, especially in geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas across the country that are not yet serviced by wireless networks or fiber optics. On top of that, you rightfully mentioned that we are a disaster-prone country. We are frequently struck by typhoons and earthquakes, which could easily result in damages to IT infrastructure, such as fiber cuts, damages to cellular towers, and even electricity outages. So what we are proposing is an alternative solution to complement traditional connectivity with satellite technology to connect the last mile and underserved areas in the country, as well as to provide redundancy for reliable connectivity. Not to say that there's really no perfect technology, but it is an alternative solution and a viable solution, especially today. Using very small aperture terminals, or VSATs for short. These are about 1.2 meters wide and can be powered by solar panels and can be rapidly deployed and provides reliable high-speed broadband to connect small communities and especially remote, micro, small, and medium enterprises to ensure uninterrupted connectivity and keep day-to-day activities and operations ongoing.
Very interesting developments in terms of VSAT. We have yet to learn more about that, and you'll discuss more about that in the second part of our program. So thank you, Gino. This time, it's time to have a short break, but we will have more to talk about in the second half of the program. Don't forget that you can continue to post your questions at our chat box, and we'll get to them later in the event. You're watching SCMAP Live, presented in partnership with Eastern Communications. We'll be back after this short break.
The past year was difficult for our country, its people, and the businesses we've built to keep ourselves afloat. Even now, local enterprises all over the country are still struggling to bounce back and recover what they've lost while still dealing with the ever-present challenges caused by the pandemic's persistence. Challenges like acquiring new clients, meeting the needs of their current customer base, holding physical meetings, communicating with colleagues in different parts of the country, or even manufacturing, sourcing, and delivering their products and services. The truth is, many businesses are unsure of how to keep up with the digital capabilities of other companies who are able to thrive because they can adapt their brick-and-mortar businesses to online platforms or create e-commerce spaces where they can still offer their services at the tap of a finger or a click of the button. In order to bounce back, it's crucial to transition to the digital space. We need a strong connection to a digital solutions provider that can help us take that fearless step forward. How can we adjust to the now normal? Where can we find the digital lifeline needed to give every business an equal footing in this new era of online spaces and technological solutions? As we continue to fearlessly transform and innovate, we must never lose sight of what makes our connections strong. Let Eastern Communications be that very digital lifeline for your company. In the past and up until today, Eastern's strong connections have been helping bridge the gap and empower businesses to upgrade their services in order to better serve their clients' evolving needs. Through our wide variety of high-tech products and solutions, your company can also adapt to the now normal. Which is why, during this difficult time, we want to remind you that you aren't alone. Together with Eastern Communications, let us open new doors and create wider avenues in the digital space. Together, we can all innovate and improve in order to fearlessly move forward and stride strong into a new digital frontier.
Here's a warm hello from Eastern Communications. We're here to present a refreshing point of view that when it comes to delivering business communication solutions, it's time to bring back the human connection because it's just as important as the technology. Eastern Communications is business made personal. It means getting intimate with our clients' needs so we can provide thoughtful solutions to help them achieve their goals. That's why we are madaling kausap. May malasakit. We are maalam at maaasahan. This is what sets us apart from all others. When we have a heart for service, our every move seeks to meet the needs of our clients. Our clients are happy when their needs are met. When they're happy, they're in a better position to make their own customers happy. You see, beyond advanced communications technology, we see the people who will use them. And so, we see problems that must be solved. For every challenge, there is a happier outcome. Every goal is the destination. We see every relationship that must be strengthened. As we do all we can to offer technology that is always solid and reliable, we never lose sight of our brand of personalized customer service. It's a connection that is both high-tech and high-touch. We see a customer who will be glad to know that our connection is as reliable as our commitment to personalized customer service. Unwavering, unflagging, and undeniably strong. High tech and high touch. That's our strong connection. We are Eastern Communications.
Welcome back to SCMAP Live, presented in partnership with Eastern Communications. I'm Ana Rose Ochoa, and still with us are Edsel Paglinawan, Product and Innovation Head of Eastern Communications, and Gino Belgira, National Partnership Manager of Kacific Broadband Satellites. We previously talked about the changing landscape for businesses and for the wider accessibility of options for digitalizing our supply chain and operations. And we mentioned earlier that the Philippines is a disaster-prone country with the threat of typhoons and earthquakes always looming. We also continue to face other disruptions in our businesses, from COVID-19 economic lockdowns, port congestions, and even geopolitical events like the war in Ukraine. It may seem such a daunting time to build resilient and future-proof supply chains. So Edsel, let me ask you, when is the right time to do just that?
Thank you, Ms. Ochi. I think the best time is, actually, I think we passed the timelines already for us to do the resiliency or to implement resiliency in our network, in our operations. I shared earlier na nagulat na lang tayo na the scale or the magnitude of the crisis is as wide as what we've experienced in the past 2 years. Nagulat na lang tayo na hindi pala lahat tayo ready. It's luckily, okay, the digitalization that has happened overnight was really happened overnight. Now, the thing here is we have to be ready at this point in time. You mentioned in the question earlier, the Philippines being a typhoon-prone country with a lot of geopolitical instabilities happening around the US and the China trade war, for example, the ports congestion, etc. All this stuff. We need to do the resiliency and build the future-proof or do the future-proofing of our supply chains. Otherwise, we'll end up with experiencing exactly the same thing. So it should have been done in the first place, or at least during the past 2 years. If we haven't implemented 100%, I guess it's the best time for us to also rethink our strategies. I know it's not very cheap, okay, because, well, innovation and the transformation also costs money. But what's important is we do the value-based argumentation. Let's try to weigh down what are the benefits versus the cost of doing so. We've experienced in the past na naging focus natin survivability na lang kahit na mataas yung cost. What's important is we should be able to deliver the service. And we know about the shortage of the ICs. We know about the shortage of the servers, the semiconductor components, and that has brought up the price significantly. We've seen that, we've experienced that in our own infrastructure, and we've seen how the market also reacted as the price of the different IT infrastructure has soared in the past. I should say 12 months or less than 12 months. So the key here is let's try to check which of the resiliency approaches best suits our company. Is it the cloud? Again, the cloudification of the infrastructure, I think, is the key factor that has happened in the past 2 years. Luckily, we launched Eastern Cloud in 2019 without knowing that pandemic would hit. So it was a key contributor in the continuation of the delivery of the services of our customers, despite the unavailability of the supply, despite the, the temporary freeze of the transport in the market. Nakapag-launch ng applications, nakapag-expand ng capacity as such, no? And redundancy is also something which we have to think about. Gino mentioned earlier about the different use cases in using the VSAT as, for example, not just on the remote areas where there's really no footprint, but using VSAT, using the satellite connectivity as part of redundancy. If there is a remote place with only one ISP available, and that cannot afford to go down, then satellite technology can serve as a backup, and we can actually implement the same thing at this point in time already. We have introduced different technologies, or we have delivered different innovations in the country. Eastern being the first to introduce SASE in the Philippines. So for the IT professionals in this session, you can relate when I talk about the SD-WAN, right? How are we going to move away from the expensive cost of connectivity and transform the branch connectivities into broadband, putting an overlay of SD-WAN and being able to make, automatic shift kung aling connectivity yung mas effective or mas maganda yung experience over the others. And Eastern, for example, has introduced first in the Philippines the concept of the third generation branch connectivity. So saying third generation, the first generation is connecting through the leased line, second generation that's connecting using the SD-WAN, software defined WAN, and the third generation, which we started introduced last year, is the secure access service edge. That's the SASE. Again, if you're interested in improving your cost position, this is so true, especially for the supply chain industry, the retail and manufacturing as well, the banking and commerce, banking and finance, yung mga may multi-branches and who can't afford to really go offline. If we are worried about the expensive cost of internet, if we cloudify our solutions outside the Philippines, although of course Eastern is also carrying AWS, GCP, Google Cloud, Alibaba Cloud. But if we are worried about the quality of the connectivity in accessing, from the remote places towards the cloud, then we also have the locally hosted Eastern Cloud in the Philippines. So the traffic doesn't have to traverse across the boundaries of the Philippines anymore. And partly, we should be able to protect the cloud infrastructure and the access to the cloud also by connecting dedicated lines from your data center to the cloud. Similarly, part of the resiliency or part of the approaches is also in the strategic management, there is an approach called integration, right? Horizontal and vertical integration. Is it the best time for us to partner with our uplink providers, part of the supply chain, the suppliers? Is it the best time for us to partner with the verticals? Okay, so we both have the horizontal integration and the vertical integration, and that has proven to be very, very effective for Eastern Communications. So we've started partnering even just before the pandemic. We've started partnering with our customers so that they don't just become our customers, but become part of our partners in the delivery of their products to now both of our customers. And even partnership with our suppliers. Okay, used to be our suppliers before, but now we are partners. We build joint business casing. We deliver the services together, and we integrated our solutions together in order for us to build a bigger network. And the best example of that is the first geo-redundant cloud in the Philippines. So we don't necessarily have to subscribe to a cloud in Hong Kong and another cloud in the US and another cloud in Europe in order for our infrastructure to be geo-redundant. Even here in the Philippines, we can build geo-redundant cloud already. So we can put, let's say, the active applications in Makati, and the redundant application, for example, somewhere in the north, okay? And that's part of the horizontal integration that we've done in the past 2 years. We partnered with the different SaaS applications, software developers, for example, okay? So that they don't necessarily have to put the applications in any other cloud, but in the locally hosted cloud. So I think these are inspiring stories. And these are also inspiring solutions that we should be able to help the supply chain industry in the country.
Thank you very much, Edsel, for that very comprehensive response. So now, Gino, your work with satellite-powered broadband is interesting, as it could be a game changer in our efforts for better connectivity across the country. And Edsel touched a bit about that earlier. So how can businesses take advantage of satellite technologies to help improve supply chain challenges?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Ochi. It really would come down to the internet solution when it comes to satellite technology, VSAT technology. How can this type of technology enable supply chains, businesses, to be able to do agile ways of working, to transform their value chain and adopt a more holistic and technology-led approach to manage supply chain and ultimately achieve end-to-end transparency. What businesses are looking to do is to achieve visibility across the board, from demand to inventory, capacity, supply, and also finances. And with internet connectivity, we can enable this kind of transformation or business transformation, and also adopt and help businesses to achieve business continuity planning as well. If I may share, in the region, Kacific is not only catering to the Philippines, but we have, as a satellite operator based in Singapore, we have presence across 25 different countries in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And if I may share some examples, specific examples of how some of our other customers in other regions are using the technology within the industry, we have Express Freight Management. They are one of the leading freight services providers in Papua New Guinea. They have today over 300 employees, and they service over 100 ships every year and deliver tens and thousands of containers and air freight. Prior to connecting to VSAT or satellite technology, they used to have or experience slow internet that they also felt was expensive for the speeds that they were getting. And when they discovered VSAT through our local provider, FusionNet, they were able to connect their business to use cloud solutions and can also do high-speed streaming to keep their operations ongoing. And this is one of other examples with Swire Shipping, Interlink, and other companies across the region that we were able to connect and provide provide high-speed internet that's affordable and allows these different companies to mobilize more easily with faster broadband and using smaller antennas, which also helps bring down costs for these companies.
Thank you very much for allowing us to know about those developments. Let's now talk about doable strategies. Talking about future-proofing our businesses and our supply chains can be intimidating, especially in the light of continuing and emerging disruptions. Edsel, where should businesses start?
Many things are not going to change from our experience. Consumers will continue to want low prices, especially during recession. And the firms want to be able to charge more just because they manufacture the higher cost home markets. The competition will ensure that. And in addition, the pressure to operate efficiently and the use of capital and manufacturing capacity frugally, that will remain unrelenting. So what are the doable steps? Uncover our hidden, these are just the basic stuff that, part of our experience as well. Let's try to uncover our hidden risks. Let's try to address our hidden risks. It's very difficult for a firm to possess that breadth of capabilities necessary to produce everything by itself. So we should be able to have that in the supply, we should be able to discover what are the different vulnerabilities and what are the different ways in order to diversify our supply base. In our experience, we ask our distributors to stock up and increase, our uplinks capacity. Nakita namin before, merong mga customers na gusto mag-expand. Initially, of course, ang problema natin is we were all living with just-in-time concept, right? So that's the supply chain, the chief supply chain officers, I should say, were living on the just-in-time as part of the strategies in supply chain. And while we have to really hold immediate inventory or safety stock, we were constrained before on that mantra of just-in-time and lean manufacturing. And the supply chain was considered as a cost center before, unnecessary evil, I should say. Supply chain managers focused heavily on operational efficiency as directed by our finance officers, by our CEOs, by our CFOs. But now it's totally different, okay? And how we approach that as part of our doable recommendation is that probably there's a need for us to increase our safety stock, and we have been doing that. And that's the reason why, like for example, if there's an immediate requirement for our customers, we need this kind of equipment, we need this kind of capacity, then we've learned our lessons in the past 2 years that we should be able to stock up our inventory of the equipment and our inventory of the capacity, as we increased also our capacity in connecting the Philippines to the rest of the world. Now we have to revisit also the trade-off, between the product variability and or the product variety and the capacity flexibility. So that's something that we should, I think about as well, that there might be some reinvention that we need to think about the products that we are delivering. One of the best examples, well, it's not a supply chain industry, but the best example is, or one of the best examples, I guess, is Airbnb. Okay, when the pandemic hit us, a lot of the condominiums shut down the Airbnb business or didn't allow the Airbnb. So what Airbnb did and what the hosts did is to reinvent themselves, not offering short-term stays, but offering experiences, offering online cooking, offering online travel, these are the stuff that I guess part of the doable things that we can do.
Okay. Thank you, Edsel. Gino, about the connectivity question, what should businesses keep in mind when considering their options for reliable and wide-reaching connectivity?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Ochi. When it comes to what businesses should keep in mind in terms of being able to consider options for reliable and wide-reaching connectivity, it'll go back down to the business case. It will go into the technology innovation and of course the cost. What I can share is that the reality today is that satellite technology has evolved over the past years with advancements in satellite technology and the emergence of Ka-band. And when you're talking about satellite solution, especially for the supply chain, today newer satellite technology enables internet connectivity or broadband to be more affordable and can offer higher speed internet for end users altogether. Just a little bit about Ka-band. Ka-band technology allows end users to experience faster speeds up to 100 Mbps, which can definitely connect small remote offices from 4 to over 60 people using smaller antennas that are just 1.2 meters in width. And because these are very compact, they can easily be transported and installed on a roof deck or a faraway island. And as satellite today is now less dependent on larger, clunky equipment, these smaller antennas are much more affordable, for as low as $500 to $600 for a one-time cost. And this can connect remote branches and operations. At Kacific, I must share that we have launched our first Ka-band high throughput satellite, the Kacific One, last December of 2019, which places us to be operational for about 2 years now. The satellite was funded by ADB. It was manufactured by Boeing and launched by SpaceX to provide over 60 Gbps of capacity across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And as mentioned earlier, today we serve 25 countries across the region with nationwide coverage in the Philippines that spans all 7,100 islands from Batanes to Palawan down to Sulu, Tawi-Tawi. And in partnership with Eastern Communications, what we're able to do is to connect these businesses regardless of scale and even these small communities nationwide using this VSAT and satellite technology.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gino. Okay, one more final question to both Edsel and Gino before we take in one of our questions. Do you think we are ready for the next disruptions that definitely lies ahead of us?
If I may take first, Gino.
Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, the COVID pandemic won't definitely be the last black swan that will disrupt, the global supply chains and all the other industries. A lot of disruptions, not just pandemic, natural disasters, trade wars, the cyber attacks, as I mentioned earlier, epidemics, they have become a commonplace nowadays. So while it's impossible to predict what disruption comes next, companies can actually adopt digital solutions to mitigate some sort of fallout. And that's why thriving through the next disruption will require companies to embrace the next generation technologies that provide this end-to-end supply chain visibility. We have laid the foundation. We've achieved a lot in the past 2 years. I should say technology is ready and it's ever evolving. We've been partnering as a company, Eastern has been partnering with the different technology partners in the past, especially aggressively in the past 3 years. With Kacific in there, being able to provide internet wherever you are, and even in the typhoon affected areas. It's just a matter of the execution of the democratization. And I believe, yes, I believe we are ready. We have to continue. As I mentioned, we have to continue to sustain the momentum that we have started. If we can just move away from the analysis paralysis thingy, which I myself sometimes a victim of, okay? Let's just do it. If we think the value-based argumentation, that we believe that the benefits over the cost, the benefits outweighs the cost, then I think it's the best time for us to really proceed with what we think is best for the businesses. Readiness as far as the landscape in the Philippines, I guess we are. The Philippine government has laid down very good foundation as well. Okay, and I guess with the plan of the next administration, for example, that includes the enhancement of the infrastructure projects, including the digital infrastructure. This is what I read or this is what I saw in YouTube the other day. Enhancement of the infrastructure projects, including the digital infrastructure, that will make us even more ready for the next disruption.
Yeah, for me, I guess just to add on to Edsel's points, what the pandemic, for me, what I feel is that what the pandemic continues to teach us today is regardless of whether you are a business owner, a student, a doctor, or what have you, we need to be flexible and adapt. And I think the question there is, what sustainable actions or measures can we take to prepare us to deal with an uncertain future? At Kacific, our vision is to connect the vulnerable, underserved, and underconnected in the country to drive economic growth and make a lasting difference in these communities. And we believe that with our partnership with Eastern Communications, we would be able to achieve this.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we turn on to some questions from our chat box. Let me read through it. Okay. Okay, here's a question. Currently, what single communication technology development stands out in terms of enabling the primary activities of the value chain? And then he adds on, what management style would be appropriate supporting this technology, speeding up generation of results that strategically matters for the company? So first, he was asking about the single communication technology that stands out in terms of enabling the primary activities in the value chain. Any thoughts?
I think it's very difficult to say about the single communication technology. It all depends on the use case. Okay, this what I may be saying now as the single most important communications technology might not be relevant to some other industries. But again, one thing is if we are moving towards digital or if we are already in digital, making sure that we have resilient connectivity. It's the basic. Let's go back to the basic. Can we afford to go offline? If we can't afford to go offline, then we should be able to put resilient technology even as an overlay to our existing connectivity. Do we have a single internet connectivity? Or do we need a redundant connectivity, not necessarily an expensive redundant connectivity, because we have available technologies in the market today that will enable us to provide redundant internet connectivity at even reduced cost. Okay, if you're interested in knowing more about that, we'd be more than happy to share with you what's that approach. I call that, or we call that as the SASE technologies, Secure Access Service Edge, where we can make use of your existing connectivity as underlay. Gumagamit ka ngayon ng dedicated internet. Probably we don't need dedicated internet. We can make use of the broadband, so it's much reduced cost, and put an overlay. It's because of the software that will make it even faster, even using the satellite communications as part of your underlay connectivity. If we already have resilient connectivity, how protected are our applications are, okay? Do we have the proper cybersecurity measures in place? Are we able to protect the endpoints, the computers, the cell phones? Are we able to protect the data of customers? Are we able to protect our data centers? Are we able to protect the IT infrastructure that we have probably invested so heavily that in just one snap of a finger, somebody else might, do some attack? So I think it's both. It's about, to me, anything related to resiliency in our connectivity and protecting our connectivity. These are the two equally important things as part of the basics. Now, on the management style, I think it's all about the agility. I mentioned about the analysis paralysis earlier, and been the victim of that also. We're analyzing too heavily, up to the point that we breached that point that the problem is already there, and we were not able to decide for ourselves what's the best approach. We don't necessarily have to do the overthinking. We have a lot of consultants around. We have the information available in the internet, and we have the facilities, and we have the resources of our partners who can give us the right information and give pave way to give us the different options where to do or what to do next. And that's where we are offering our service also as Eastern communication service provider.
Okay, thank you. So here's another question. First is thanking us for this session. We've recognized that transitioning to digital is a must. But before that, I think an important step is having an overall assessment of digital transformation readiness of a company, especially for the supply chain departments and their practitioners. Okay, let's see. I lost. Okay, let's see at that again. What other areas are important to be assessed aside from these three key ones? Budget, management, culture, and training readoption for supply chain practitioners. Anyone?
I'm trying to look for. I'm not able to see the question on the chat box. Can you repeat it again?
Okay, so An important step is having an overall assessment of digital transformation readiness of a company, especially for the supply chain departments and their practitioners. What other areas are important to be assessed aside from these key ones: budget, management culture, and training readoption for supply chain practitioners?
Okay, I should say, I mean, I don't want to pretend to be expert in supply chain. I think you're more expert in supply chain, but to me, it's more about a part of the assessment is really our IT infrastructure. I can speak on behalf of technology at this point in time, but on the business side and the operation side of the supply chain, I believe that we have industry experts available out there, okay, or probably in your companies to do the assessment. But to me, what's important is how are we going to make, to ensure that our IT infrastructure, our digital infrastructure are resilient when it times of, another crisis.
Yeah, and if I can just quickly add on to that point, I think
Please.
today technology has also been rapidly developing. There are new technologies available, and when it comes to, as Edsel mentioned, having that resiliency, there are solutions in place now that can allow businesses, no matter where they are, to be able to connect to the internet remotely.
So we just have one more question. What is Eastern's program or solution for data loss protection or prevention?
Okay, if I may mention the brand, okay, we have partnered with Fortinet and with Trend Micro for the DLP.
Okay, to know more about that, you can check out their website. Okay. Now, truly, future-proofing the supply chain is a never-ending game, so we can never stop improving it. We always need to keep an eye on new technological advancement and connectivity solutions to ensure that everything can run smoothly for years to come. Thank you to our panelists this afternoon, Edsel Paglinawan of Eastern Communications and Gino Belgira of Kacific Broadband Satellite. And they will be sending a survey to all the participants to know more about your needs. And thank you too for taking part in this edition of SCMAP Live. And finally, a big thank you to our event partner, Eastern Communications, for making this event possible. Before we close, a reminder to answer our feedback form, which will be in your browsers at the end of the event. You can also keep in touch with our future events through our website, scmap.org, and you can also check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So that wraps it up for this edition of SCMAP Live. I'm Ana Rose Ochoa, wishing you all good health, and let's keep supply chain moving. We hope to see you in our future events, both virtual and face-to-face. Enjoy the rest of the day. God bless us all.